May the 10th, 1917. A torpedo wake slices toward the hull of the British liner Transylvania. On her bridge, Captain James Ellison feels the deck buckle. Once, twice. Before the sea claws open her starboard plates, 3,000 souls stumble into darkness. Yet, out of the haze, two lean silhouettes race in, white bow waves cutting like scalpels. They are not British, not French, not American. Their battle flags carry the crimson disk of the rising sun. In 12 minutes, the Japanese destroyers Matsu and Sakaki haul aboard more than 900 shivering passengers. One of the survivors, a British officer, will later write, "The Italians are inefficient, the French unreliable, the Greeks impossible, the Americans too far away. The Japanese, small in number, are magnificent." But how did the empire of the chrysanthemum, only 50 years removed from medieval isolation, come to patrol Europe's bloodied sea lanes? Why did a nation most Westerners still pictured as sword-wielding samurai suddenly man the lifelines of a global war? Tonight, we sail into the forgotten flank of the First World War, into typhoons of ambition, corridors of steel, and a diplomatic poker game that will redraw the map of Asia. This is the story of Japan's Great War, a war fought not for trenches, but for leverage. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand staggered against his open car in Sarajevo, Europe's alliances snapped shut like bear traps. London, Paris, St. Petersburg, Berlin, Vienna, each capital assumed the coming struggle would be brief, parochial, European. None foresaw that the first shots in Asia would be fired within a fortnight. None imagined that a country half the size of Texas would tip the balance of a world war. Yet by August of 1914, Japan possessed the third largest navy on Earth, British-built battleships, German-trained artillerymen, American model, steel mills, and a national debt that had quadrupled in a decade. To understand why Japan pounced on Germany's Pacific possessions, we must first understand what memory tastes like to a nation. In 1895, after crushing China on land and sea, Japan swallowed the Liaodong Peninsula, Taiwan, and the Pescadores. Triumph lasted exactly 6 days. Russia, France, and Germany, the Triple Intervention, ordered Tokyo to disgorge its prize. Humiliation stung like vinegar in an open wound. Japanese newspapers spoke of the night the white wolves howled at our door. Students slit their fingers and wrote oaths in blood. Never again shall foreign bayonets dictate our destiny. Within a decade, Japan signed an alliance with the mightiest empire of them all, Great Britain. The message was unmistakable. If the wolves return, we hunt with a lion. So when London's telegram arrived on August 4th, 1914, requesting Japan's help in destroying German raiders in Chinese waters, Foreign Minister Kato Takaki did not deliberate. He heard opportunity knocking in perfect English. Kato was a Chosai samurai by birth, a Harvard law student by training, and an imperial realist by conviction. To him, the war in Europe was a window that might slam shut at any moment. Through that window, he saw 4 prizes: German Kiaokao, German Pacific atolls, British goodwill, and American respect. Berlin had 8 weeks' warning. Kaiser Wilhelm's colonial garrison at Tsingtao numbered 5,000. 1 infantry regiment, a naval battalion, a handful of heavy guns, and the armored cruisers Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. Against them, Tokyo would fling 68 warships and 25,000 seasoned soldiers. The odds were 13 to 1 on land, 10 to 1 at sea. Imperial headquarters predicted a fortnight's walkover. Reality proved messier. Tsingtao's hills were carved into redoubts, its streets barricaded with beer barrels, its hospitals stocked with Tsingtao brewed lager for the wounded. For 48 days, the siege ground on naval gunnery duels at dawn, infantry sorties through terraced graveyards, seaplanes bombing torpedo boats. On November 7th, 1914, the last German bugle sounded retreat. 1,700 defenders lay dead. Japanese casualties numbered 700. While Tsingtao's guns cooled, another campaign, silent, unplanned, erupted across the Pacific. Berlin's island colonies, the Marshalls, the Carolines, the Marianas, were dots on nautical charts, but to Japanese planners they were aircraft carriers, made of coral. On October 3rd, 1914, the cruiser squadron sailed without awaiting cabinet approval. By mid-November, every German island fortress from Palau to Jaluit had lowered the black, white, red and hoisted the rising sun. The Pacific had changed hands over breakfast. Yet the German East Asia Squadron, Vice Admiral Maximilian von Spee's armored cruisers, still prowled the open ocean. Japan, Australia, and Britain pooled intelligence, fuel, and cryptographers. The chase climaxed off the Falklands in December 1914, Spee's squadron annihilated. By the spring of 1915, Japan's appetite sharpened again. Prime Minister Kuma Shigenobu summoned his cabinet to a villa overlooking Mount Fuji. The agenda: 21 demands to be served to a helpless Chinese president. If accepted, China would become a protectorate in all but name. Yuan Shikai, president of the fractured republic, wept when the memorandum arrived. He had 48 hours. On May 9, 1915, China's National Day of Shame, Yuan accepted the revised 13 demands. Japan had won Shantung, South Manchurian railways, and the keys to China's economic future. Japan was also paying the butcher's bill in other currencies. Her destroyers escorted Australian troopships, her shipyards refitted Russian merchantmen, her steel mills forged artillery shells that would roar above. Verdun. Japanese nurses arrived at Marseille speaking fluent French. In January 1917, Japan dispatched her first special squadron, 2 cruisers, 8 destroyers, based at Malta. Over the next 18 months, they escorted 800 Allied transports, rescued 7,000 survivors, and lost 1 destroyer, Sakaki, torpedoed off Crete. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, another revolution unfolded. In March 1917, the Romanov scepter snapped. By November, the Bolsheviks had signed an armistice with Berlin. Now, 50,000 Czechoslovak legionaries stranded along the Trans-Siberian Railway needed rescue. On April 5, 1918, Japanese Marines stormed ashore at Vladivostok. They were supposed to number 7,000. By autumn, 72,000 Japanese soldiers occupied every major port from Nikolaevsk to Chita. Tokyo dreamed of a buffer state, eastern Siberia as Manchuria's twin. November 11, 1918. The guns fall silent along the Western Front. Delegates converge on Paris. Japan arrives as one of the Big Five. Her delegation led by a champagne-loving prince, a Harvard-educated baron, and a Christian diplomat who carries a draft clause on racial equality. For 4 months, the world's statesmen argue over borders, reparations, war guilt. Japan's demands are concise. Retain Shantung, retain the Pacific mandates, insert into the covenant the principle that all races are equal. The first 2 she wins. The third she loses by a single vote. Yet the Ledger of Versailles still records Japan among the victors. She leaves the conference with 1,300 square miles of Chinese treaty ports, 3,000 miles of Pacific atolls, a permanent seat on the League Council, and a navy second only to Britain and America in tonnage. But the embers of resentment glow. Army officers returning from Siberian blizzards grumble that politicians sold the nation short. Naval captains realize how far they still lag in oil reserves. In the rice fields of Kidshi, a young lieutenant named Hideki Tojo predicts the Anglo-American powers will always conspire to keep Asia subordinate. So what did Japan do during the First World War? She escorted 750,000 Allied soldiers, supplied the shells that bled Germany white, rescued drowning strangers, seized German islands and ports, forced China to its knees, marched into Siberia, and refused to leave. She demanded equality, received territory, and swallowed humiliation. She played the loyal ally and the opportunist. She emerged richer, stronger, yet more convinced than ever that the international order was rigged against her. The world would spend the next 20 years discovering what happens when that resentment festers, and that number is no longer small.